thank you. Okay, I'm calling to order the meeting of the Committee to Assess and Recommend Strategies for Housing Creation with the Town of Barnstable. We have a quorum, and I can read this. This meeting is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Town of Barnstable Government Access Channel in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Are you guys recording the meeting? No, I don't think so. This meeting will be replayed via the Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live video on demand archives on the Town of Barnstable's website, which is https://streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site /channel =1. I'm sure everybody got that. So.
Committee members, Councilor Paula Schnapp. Here. Councilor Betty Lutke.
Here.
Councilor Charles Bloom.
Here.
Councilor John Crow.
Here.
Councilor Gordon Starr. Mary Ann Barboza. Here. Hilda Hay. Here. Chair of Committee Rick Presby.
Here.
Committee member Laura Schufelt. You have quorum.
One of the things I want to just inform the board of, those who don't know this, is at the last council meeting, we were asked if we would, and this is something I learned after the meeting because I wasn't sure what we were being asked to do, but to basically explain to the council how affordable housing is developed. That is, how is ownership and rental housing developed? What's the process, and how does it all work? Because the council, of course, in dealing with some of this stuff, has to, like any of us, has to understand better how things really work, so that what the committee can make the decision of what I thought we would do, and this doesn't have to be the case, is for Laura Schufelt and I to go to the council and have a workshop, basically a council workshop, which will probably take, half hour, 45 minutes to do, and then there would be questions. Laura, as you all know, works in the field in Boston and has a point of view where she understands a lot of this stuff. I understand some of it, but not all of it, because when I did development, other people were doing most of the work, and I was sitting there pointing my finger at, do it or don't do it, or it works or it doesn't work, or there's money or there isn't money, and so forth. So I have a lot to learn, too, about that, even though I've done quite a lot of it, too. So, but it's really a question of whether what the committee wants to do, and whether the committee, I expect, would probably want to come to the council meeting and have the same learning experience that the council has. And that won't happen, I don't think, for another month or so, it looks like. But I just wanted to mention that because it's another thing for us to do. And hopefully we can do help out and do a good job doing it. Any comments about that? So after saying that, I'll ask for a public comments from people in the audience. You can talk in a minute. Well,
hi, Eric Schwab from Hyannis. How you doing? Staying warm? I wanted to add to your to-do list, if I could.
say that again?
I'd like to add to your to-do list, if I may.
Okay.
One is, I think it'd be very helpful if you formed an opinion on recent news that the homeless shelter at 77 Winter is afoot and is looking for a new location. One proposal has been a property at 460 West Main Street, and there are concerns that that property may not be suitable, may not be well placed, removes people from the services they rely on, and kind of shunts them off. So there's concerns about that in the neighborhood and around town. And I think it'd just be helpful if you express an opinion on that shelter move. The other thing that's come up, which speaks to the whole Mills thing, is that apparently when the town applied for sewer funding and started building all these big conduits, this backbone system that we're building, there were no restrictions on growth. The town did not accept flow-neutral financing, so they can build on either side of that pipe all the way to the mills. And my understanding is that there's potential for a fairly large development in Centerville that's being discussed. And there's the potential for a whole lot of growth around the Bell Tower Mall area. So I think the one thing that you could do as a housing committee is express an opinion on the financing mechanism being used or that was selected, because it's going to cost the taxpayers an extra $111 million in financing cost over the 20-year life of the clean water bonds that we're applying for. So the town, has a choice of what kind of financing they want, and the interest rate is determined by what restrictions they accept. So the more restrictive the housing plans, the lower the interest rate. So if you don't accept any restrictions, you can basically go to town, which appears to be what's happening in Centerville now and is potentially going to happen in the mills. So again, since it impacts housing, it'd be great if you guys formed an opinion on it. Maybe ask Mark Milne to come in or Director Santos to come in and talk about the impact of these financing choices on housing development along the sewer lines in Centerville and Marston's Mills. Thanks.
So my question is, it doesn't seem to me to fit in with the description of what we've been asked to do. But I'll certainly defer to the the committee as a whole and as to how they feel about the subjects. Obviously, the shelter subject, I've lived 24 hours a day with that and got rid of it before I retired, so the next person wouldn't have to deal with it. But so I don't know if I'm prejudiced or not, but I want nothing to do with it. But anyway.
I think your opinion on the shelter and its role in the community in Hyannis would be welcome. I think it doesn't have to be more than an opinion. Doesn't need to be a formal pronouncement from this committee if you're uncomfortable doing that. I do think, though, the sewer financing impacts housing outside of Hyannis. Okay, I mean, Hyannis, we can talk about building all the apartments here in Hyannis you want, because sewer isn't really a factor. We have it already. But if you're going to build high-density, multifamily housing, outside of Hyannis, you're either going to need sewer or you're going to need, pretty advanced cluster systems that remove both nitrogen and phosphorus. So I think it's germane. I mean, you don't need to talk about it if you don't want to, but it will impact your ability to develop housing outside of Hyannis.
I'll make one comment to that and then ask the committee, but I do think the issue of, we were talking about this before the meeting, just the two of us here, just as a chat, but does Hyannis become a city over time? Give us 50 years and have all that stuff, everything in Hyannis, and you keep the village communities with the same sort of suburbia look about them, or do you let other things happen? And I think that making decisions about the future is really a tough thing for a whole lot of reasons, which we all know. If those of us, at least that are over 70, know darn well how tough it is to predict the future. But having said that, these are two questions that I will ask the committee. That is, do we take a position on the, and if we want to, I can explain a lot about it, but do we want to allow the shelter to be moved from where it is now to 460 West Main, which is an office building of about 22,000 square feet with an elevator and parking. And the agency my old agency bought the building from the two other partners, and is moving shortly to Independence Park. And what they want to do with it is move what used to be the NOAA and is the St. Joseph Shelter to that location in that building. That's the question.
Yeah, and
And
the second one would be, does this housing committee have a position on flow-neutral financing? Is that something that's going to be considered by the town council? And I think it would be appropriate for your committee to have an opinion, which you could forward to the council for consideration.
So explain that term. What is
Flow neutral.
finance?
That means that if you're sewering an area, you expect the flow that's going into backyard septic systems to more or less approximate the flow that'll be coming to Hyannis via pipe to the wastewater treatment system. I mean, we have
Okay.
already all kinds of issues with our wastewater treatment plant. It's mounding, which means it's like filling up. And, do we allow unrestricted growth of wastewater flows or not? And
So
again, that's
the real question for us is whether we want to get involved in taking a position on these two very separate and different issues or not.
Right.
And that's the question
Right.
I'm asking the committee to make comments on now or at a later time when we've had more time to think about it, whatever people think.
Thank you for your consideration. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Yeah.
Is it on now? Like I need a mic. But my understanding, getting on these committees, was to scout the area, look for affordable housing, empty buildings, and whatever we can find, and make a recommendation to help the needy or people who are struggling. Now, am I wrong about that? And I heard you say if they want to make it a city, it's already a city. They did that a long time ago. They turned the Cape into a city. And I'm going to fight forever when you hear them talk about the buildings they're putting up, and there may be 50 apartments in there, and 5 are affordable. All you're doing is bringing more rich people. And again, I have nothing personal against anybody who's wealthy. But our job is to help people who are struggling to find affordable housing. And in my opinion, as far as getting involved in the shelter, I think that's actually why we're here. We should be involved in that, because if we sit with our mouths closed, that shelter is gone. Homeless are now living everywhere else. I mean, they're struggling already. We have to be involved in that some kind of way. And then and I'm going to say one last thing, and I know I'm all over the place right now because my emotions are in many places right now. But at one meeting, I heard someone say, oh, and we're worried about the storekeepers. We got to make sure we get the homeless from being on Main Street. We have to think about their businesses. And I didn't have a chance to jump into that conversation. I wish I had. Because those storekeepers are the people that live in all these areas that when you try to build affordable housing, we don't want them in our area. You don't want them on Main Street. You don't want them in your area. Knock it off. People have a right to live, so I'm going to let it go, and I don't know what other role we have other than looking for affordable housing, finding a solution, and putting it on the table. So that's what I thought I was joining for.
Nobody else got a comment? Yeah, somebody? Yeah, you are.
Sure.
Paula.
Mary Ann, I appreciate your comments and concerns about especially our most vulnerable in the community. But I believe this committee was created and tasked with a very specific mission, and that was to come up with several strategies for the creation and support of housing. My bias is the affordable piece, so I'm right there with you. But I think it's mission creep if we start to comment on things that are not actually even something that's going to go before the council. And the flow neutral is a very separate financing issue but it's also a planning issue that we have to wrestle with at the council level. I don't believe that this is the place for us to start that conversation. So I think we need to stay focused. We have a goal of delivering back to the council strategies by March 31st, and I think we should try to stay on task.
Respond. I so appreciate what you're saying, and I do understand because I believe you've always been fighting for people to have affordable housing. I've known you to fight for that. But as we all know, no matter what we do, no matter what committee you're on, if you don't deal with the underlying problem that nobody talks about, we're not getting anywhere. Because whatever we take back, there's going to be people sitting in a room somewhere that are worried about, oh, if I go that way, I won't get voted for again. There's always that underlying issue, and it has to be brought to the front. And every single committee has to talk about it, that the people in this committee don't want poor people in their area. So we can take whatever we want to the town council. We can put the best plan in their lap. But that underlying issue is what's going to take precedent. And that's how they're going to make their decisions on how many people are going to be upset with them. So I just believe in putting things on the table up front. So I think this is a place to talk about all of it. Because no matter what we feel about that building over there, there's going to be 10 people that says, they're not coming in my neighborhood. We have to deal with that. But I love the fact that you have always you've always fought for affordable housing. So I already know where your heart is, and that's a good thing. So I'm happy to be on the committee with you and everyone else up here, because I know everyone else up here fights too. Thank you.
I just want to quickly say that the purpose of the committee is to recommend strategies for the creation of housing to serve year-round residents and seasonal workers. And I think we have to keep that in mind, that we're not building projects for people who don't live here. We're not building projects for wealthy people who can buy market rate units. We need affordable housing.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mary Ann over here that, and I know, Rick, you brought this up earlier when we looked at what are the groups we're looking at? And the unhoused are a group. They are, I guess, at the bottom of the pile, but they're still a group. And I don't think anyone wants to be unhoused, although there are unhoused people that do not want to be in shelters. That is an absolute fact. But whether they want to be unhoused is another determination. And, to that, I think we need to focus on, what Charlie just read here for our, our seasonal or full-time workers. And certainly the evidence is there, and I looked again at the presentation that Jim Kupfer made, and I look at the numbers here. What we've been doing isn't working. It's providing what Charlie said he doesn't want to do. It's providing market rate, and some of the occupancy rates are somewhat high. And I talk about, places like Hanover, and now they're doing a second Hanover. So we haven't been doing, so it's up to us to come forward with some real strategies. And maybe they're tiny, but tiny has an impact. The big stuff isn't working, these grand things. If we would focus, I think, on some smaller wins, maybe they're a little bit difficult, but that's okay. The homeless shelter is a tricky one because this town doesn't have a human services department. We have a human services committee, so we're outside of the entire decision process for that. It makes it difficult for us to have any kind of reasonable or thoughtful input when we're completely out of that. And Rick, you made a statement that when you left HAC, you got out of that business too. So it's tough to be inserting ourselves into that when we've purposely gotten out of it. So that's hard. Flow neutral, I believe we're going to take that up as a council. It's important. Our costs are enormous for this sewer system, and we ought to be thinking about our development in terms of that. But again, when I look at Jim Kupfer's, it's build, one after the next with very few affordable. So it's just hard to parse this out. It all goes together. I mean, we do have to focus, and I think Charlie focused us, Paula, but there's so many tentacles to this we have to consider. So these are good things to kind of keep in our mind.
Well, go ahead.
Councilor Luckey, I don't know if I'm going to correct you or not. I think you were meant to say there's high vacancy rates in a lot of these
Yes,
units instead of high occupancy. And I think that's going to be part of our problem. I think we may be building ourselves into a position where we have a lot of housing, but none of the housing is needed for the people we're trying to make the housing for. And that takes up critical resources, water and everything else. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to figure out, where we stand on being able to service all these new developments. So I think that's something we got to think about also.
No, I just wanted to add one more thing. I had an opportunity to speak with a woman who's helping put renters into apartments. She was incredibly knowledgeable on this. And she said flat out, you cannot work, name your service industry. I won't pick any brand names, but you're working full-time as a service person. You can't afford an apartment here. It's not possible. And then even folks that get vouchers, they still can't afford it. So it's really a conundrum, which I think we have to work to get to that that lower level, and not keep thinking, well, we'll build these market rates and we'll have the 10% affordable and all is well. It's not well at all, because the people who are working full time ought to be able to live somewhere, and it's not possible right now.
What is so funny to me is we're asked to look at a lot of the buildings that are available or things that we can use where, and when you go to look at them, they've placed the zoning there or done certain things. All these committees have come into place, I'm talking about the ones even in the past, to put certain restrictions on a building just so it can't be used. No, you have the Armory, and I'm going to stick with that in Marston's Mills. The Armory, I'm sorry, it's a building, it's there. It was put there to house bodies. Now, yes, we need heat. I know they made it historical. They did all kind of things. And that was strictly, and some committee somewhere along the line, some year, who knows when, oh, we got to save that precious building. How about saving a precious life? These buildings that are found, that building, to put heat in that building is going to cost less than it would to build a monstrosity somewhere else. But they do everything, and when I say they, I'm talking about the people, some people that sit on these committees. their whole purpose is not really to find a way to help. It's to find a way to keep people out. And that's what zoning is all about. That's what all these things are. That building is standing over there. It's strong. To put some heat in that building, it was for a base, for Army people. You mean to tell me the housing is going to, homeless are going to say, no, we don't want that. And so I'm sorry if my agenda and my emotions don't fit with hyenas, whatever, but I'm not going to accept. I just won't. No, when Marston's Mills, when you tell me you need a bunch of the babies are innocent, sweet, innocent babies need a new swing, while other sweet, innocent babies are dying in the cold. Say that 10 times. We can't use this building because we need a playground, we need swings, and we want the other kids to die because that's what's happening. People are dying. They're finding any kind of cubby hole to live in. You know, we sit here, form a committee, then another committee to do that committee, and you never stop with committees. That's why nothing ever gets done. Put the money in my hand. I guarantee you I'll find somebody to put some heat in there. I can I'll find a way to set it up. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to get this going. But what people are worried about, well, if I do this, will I lose my federal funding because I won't have a job because we solved that problem? A lot of that is going on too. If we really are going to say that we are the committee that really want to help make change, then we have to be honest with ourselves and know that a lot of that is going on, and we all know it. So while we're sitting here, please, let's talk about these buildings that are already put up. And fight, and I don't care what zoning did. I don't care who put what on it. Let's fight it. Let's fight it. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I had the privilege of going to 310 Barnstable Road yesterday evening to go visit Mr. Bornstein project with the 10 apartments. And I must report, they're looking beautiful. They're well done. The building is well lit, a lot of lighting, even in the basement, beautiful. But there are only 10 apartments, and I hope each one of us would take the time out and just to go look at it, see what it is. That's the start. That's 10 apartments that we didn't have. Not that it's enough, but that is saving 10 families right there. And so I'm just reporting back on what I see. It's beautiful. It's almost completed. I think he started doing interview for the apartments, just FYI. Also, I think some of the restriction that I see that people are facing with housing, for example, I knew somebody who needed somewhere to live. Presently living like in a 1-bedroom with like 4 or 5 people. That's what she can afford right now. Made an application to somewhere else to get a 2-bedroom, to move up from a 1 to a 2-bedroom, but was told you have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, so you need to have a 3-bedroom. Now, and I'm not sure, how do we justify somebody's looking for somewhere to live and you're going to tell them she can only afford a 2-bedroom, which is like $2,800, but the requirement is because of the amount of people, you'll need a 3-bedroom, but she cannot afford that $3,500. How do we balance this out? Because if that's what I can afford, is it easier for me to have my family together, knowing where my children are when night comes, or when it's cold, or when it's hot? than telling somebody, you need a 3-bedroom. I'm going to live in somewhere that I'm going to be so stressed out that I can't afford that extra $1,000 to pay that bill. I'm not sure where in the town or how it's been done. Maybe somebody can shed some light on that, because I think that's unfair to people. If I can only afford the 2-bedroom, my 3 children can sleep together. They're all brothers and sisters, especially if they are young kids. I would rather have my kids where I can monitor them, where I can see them. I don't have to worry about them being raped, being murdered, being abandoned somewhere else, or having them in somebody else's home, where I have high on them knowing that they're secure, they have food, and they are healthy. What is wrong with that?
I agree with you 100%. And they used to say the law because he's a boy. But sleep sofas, get a sleep couch. I mean, the policies and the things that are being made in this town, or in many towns, not just this, many towns, are ridiculous, but they are actually made to keep us out. That's why they're doing it, because, you know, I'd get a sleep bed in a heartbeat. You know, the pull-out beds, that's where you sleep. But they're still together. And I agree with you 100%. You know, if keeping my kids safe where I can see them, don't tell me, oh no, we have to put you back in the street because you need a 3-bedroom, you have a male. That's such a joke. It's not reality, it's not life. It may be, well, how can I put this? It's their life. They can afford a 10-bedroom and a this and a that. But the average human being cannot. And that's what we're supposed to be dealing with, everyday people.
Okay,
Also, can I just add to what you said, Marianne, which I agree. These are laws and rules that are made to prevent people from having a family. Because I couldn't care, even if I have to sleep on the floor and my children sleep on the bed, and all 3 of them sleep on the bed. I couldn't care as long as I have eyes on them. They are safe, they're not hungry, they're not being wet, they're not out in the cold. That is a parent's greatest concern, not to know that each one of them have a bedroom over here and a bedroom over there, and everybody have their own little space in their own little world. That's why sometimes we have so many things happening in their heads, because they don't have the, I would say, the company of each other, being close to each other, because everybody have their own room and their own little game area. They don't communicate as a family together, not spending enough time together. When you're together, you're always protecting each other, you love upon each other, you eat together, you drink together, you play together. And as long as your family are safe, for any parents, that's the uttermost importance any parent would want. And if I think they are safe with me in a 1-bedroom and I'm gonna move to a 2-bedroom, oh dear, any one of us to sit or stand and say, well, it's not appropriate. The appropriation is there, then help me to provide the 3-bedroom that you are requiring of me. Why don't you pay the rest of the bill for that 3-bedroom so I don't have to stress about it? And I can go to work and don't overstress because I have an extra $1,000. I don't have to go pick up 3 more extra hours or go look a second job and not having no time to spend with those same children. Thank you.
I wanted to make a comment and hopefully wrap up the discussion and get on with the other business. But first of all, what you two have just talked about is, of course, is the very critical basis of affordable housing, and to give people a safe place to live. And I have, believe me, I have lived in a community where I worked with a family that had 11 people in it that lived in 2 rooms. One was a bedroom, one was a kitchen. One of the kids actually slept under the sink. And, and so we got him built a house, but that was a long time ago. But I don't want, so I thank you for those comments, but I wanted to respond a little bit to Eric. You gave me time to think, which is always a mistake. And I do respect Eric's continuous work in analyzing the various issues in this town, and I think it's a good thing. I don't always agree with him, but I always respect the work that he's done to come to these conclusions, and I want to say that. The other thing I wanted to do is to, without taking a position on it, because I really, in my position, don't want to, but I want to explain the history of the Noah St. Joseph Shelter. And you may know some of this, but I think most people don't, and this gives me my chance to publicly tell the history of the place, because it's not exactly what people think. But back in about 1987, a person who worked for the town had been told to come and to find a place for shelter for homeless individuals. The town was pushing to get it. And I was the third agency they'd come to, because the first two had the brains to say no. And I sat there, and I'll never forget it, sat there knowing full well the issues that I'd have to deal with if I said yes, but I said yes. And so we searched for a place to put the facility, and we couldn't find anything because, of course, people objected wherever we went. So we bought the Porsche Audi dealership on West Main Street, spent $1 million buying it, $1 million rehabbing, fixing it up as an office building, and got two other agencies to go in there with us in the 20,000 square feet, and we're there forever after until any day now. And I'm, of course, not part of it. And we then used the Noah Shelter, what was the Noah Shelter, now the St. Joseph Shelter building, and didn't ask anybody's permission anywhere. We just moved the people in there and made it into a shelter. And we had, the standard number of people was 50. Sometimes there was 60 or 70 people there. Sometimes we were open all night, depending on the weather. Sometimes we'd feed people in the middle of the night that would come in just for food and leave. Did all that kind of stuff, and we got criticized all the time for the work that we were doing. And so that I spent a lot of time, dealing with that criticism. And, I didn't love running the place, but it certainly kept people alive who were single homeless and had nowhere to go. And we worked with them, and I had a director there who was a very caring guy, and most of the time we had two different directors over time, and I think we had it for about 30 years. And then when I decided that I had to retire at age 73, I decided that a person coming in and doing my job really wouldn't have the time to do this. And I figured that if I got the Catholic Church to do it, people wouldn't criticize it very much. And so, and it was true. It doesn't get the criticism that we got, because a lot of Catholic people don't criticize the Catholic Church, I guess. And I'm saying this on, on television, I guess so I'll be in trouble. But the people that have been there are running it. And then we had a time when we were running it when we worked hard for, I think, a couple of years with the police department and other departments trying to find a different place for it. And we still found various places that we tried to buy and do this, that, and the other thing. Nothing worked. And so it's still in the same place. And so the agency now that I'm not a part of, I'm not insider there, I don't know much of what they're doing. I did coincidentally have a conversation about this when I called about something else. And they're moving out of the office building. They bought the office building, which was not my purpose. When we got it, it was supposed to be a community access place. And they bought a building from Stewie Bornstein Industrial Park, and they're moving. And so I guess they felt it was convenient to move the shelter into that building. It has parking, it has elevator, all that kind of stuff, and they can do the work to it. So when I heard that, I didn't make any comment. I won't even mention how I felt at first when I heard that. And then, so I asked what they were going to do with the old shelter, St. Joseph building, and they don't have a plan. So that they told me they didn't anyway. So maybe, And so I started thinking about how it could be used for housing for another organization I'm on the board of. But the reason, of course, they're moving into that building is because they probably couldn't get anywhere else. And I don't know what permits they have to get for that. I just don't know. And I think that obviously wherever it moves to, the the nearest local community is going to object to it. Yeah, it's just the way it goes. And as you know, the only real issue doesn't happen inside the building. There's no real issues inside the building ever. It's issues of people walking around town, and people see the people walking around town, and and they don't like it. And sometimes they're justified, people don't like it, and sometimes, most of the time, they're not. But that's the way it is. But in the end, we were providing a place for people to stay alive in the worst of weather, 365 days of the year. And they weren't a problem for us. We didn't have problems within the building really at all. I mean, I can't even remember any particular problems. Did we call the police in 30 years? Maybe once or twice, but nothing of any significance. And so I believe it's important to save lives one way or the other with housing. And if the community wants it on one level, as the town did, but doesn't like the reality of it, they're still human beings that need us to do something to keep them alive and to give them a chance and to work with them. And so I can't say I'm in favor or not in favor of them moving to West Main Street. I know it's not going to make West Main Street a better place to be. I mean, I know that. I go to Party Freeze all too much, and I'll keep going. But I'm just sensitive, as you might imagine, as to what I did for a career about this. And would I have made the same decision they're making? I doubt it, but that doesn't matter.
May I please
Okay,
respond?
well, anyway, I just wanted to let you know that's good.
Thank you so much, but I have to respond because, and again, I know your heart, I know you always fought to help people, but when you say them, us, we are them. People can be a paycheck away from being them, and that is my issue. I don't care what the rest of the people, if you were building a strip club or a drug house or something in the neighborhood, different issue, schools. You've got people, but you notice the rich people can still get that done. If they want to strip something somewhere, they can still get that done. We have got to get to a point of stop thinking about what people want. If what we are doing is not breaking a law, if what we are doing is saving lives, then we can't sit and worry about what Tom Jones is thinking about as far as, oh, that poor person's going to walk around with holy shoes on my street. Too bad. Close your eyes. I mean, we really have to decide, because if we're going to worry about what the next person says, we are never going to get anything done. Because this, and the world we're living in today, everything, not just our town, everything is so expensive that 80% of the world right now, or the people in this country, are 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless. So either we're going to do this and fight for people without worrying about who's over my shoulder, or we got to just give it up right now. Because if you think about it, really think, any building that a rich person wants, they get it, don't they? And they could care less if somebody wanted a strip house in their neighborhood. And I'm using that for an example. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. Whatever a grown woman decides to do or a grown man is their business, but I'm using that for an example. But they get it. And we're so busy still trying to, let's do it the right way. Well, the right way is saving someone's life. I could care less. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I don't care who likes it. If I can give somebody a bed and a warm roof, I'm fighting for them. Now, sorry, that's the way it is. I'm sorry, guys. That's my personality. I don't know what to tell you guys.
Yeah.
I just got a question of information from you. The reason for moving the shelter, is it overcrowded? They need more space? What is the reason for moving the shelter from where it is to West Main at this point? I just don't know what the reason is.
I don't know for a fact why. I could theorize, but I don't want to insult anyone. You know? I think if you want to get to the basis, the really, the basis of this is that the town originally asked for that to exist for a good reason. And I think to solve the problem, the town ought to take a position and figure out how to put it somewhere that works pretty well and help to get it done, because you're saving lives, and certainly government that is one of the responsibilities of government, to create a safe place for people to live in multiple ways. And you know, I did it for all these years, and I never regretted doing it. I regretted the work I had to do, and the number of times I had to defend it, and the times I couldn't do other things because I had to defend it. But what was going on was really important. And the problem is, I think we think of them as junk people, and there's no such thing as a junk person. We're all people. And so it's, you know, it makes me very sad to say these things, because I admit that there is not enough concern for those with the greatest needs. And one of the reasons that I'm here today is to try to change that a little bit if I can, as well as other things that I do. And so I hope the place is a success, and I don't think I'm going to say it's horrible that they're moving to West Main Street, because it's a lot better than not having any place at all for everybody concerned. The people who are on the street that don't like it are better off, because people are saving others in their society, which everybody wants down deep, I think, I hope, I pray. And so we could talk about this for hours, obviously, and we have other things to do. And I'm hoping that people will keep it short, especially me.
Yeah, I was not talking about the need, but the question of the reason why it needs to be moved. And if it's
I think
past
it's
its
just
capacity.
It's a choice that has something to do with money, I think.
Okay.
But I don't know that for a fact.
So when else do you plan to get the armory up and running? Since we had a little pause in the discussion, I'll bring that up again.
So we're back to talking about our 14 ideas, and it happens to be the first one on my list is the armory. But we had a reason why the armory.
Can I make public comment? Are we still
Oh,
in
yes,
public
sorry,
comment?
yes, I forgot about
Kristen
that.
Turkelson, Town Councilor, Precinct 2.
Sorry, it got too long.
No, that's okay. I didn't want to
All
interrupt,
we're going
so
to do is have a comment tonight. We don't have any other business. I'm kidding.
it's all good. I've enjoyed the conversation.
I'm glad somebody.
And I have been following the committee. I haven't watched every meeting, but I do look forward to when you present to the Town Council. I actually kind of thought that there would have been more background to affordable housing at this point in the committee. I kind of looked forward to this committee kind of breaking down housing, affordable housing, kind of from the nuts and bolts moving forward. So I'm part of the zoning ad hoc. I know nothing about zoning when I started on that committee. And I think what was good about the committee is we really started from the assumption that we knew nothing. So it was really Jim Kupfer's job to kind of lay out zoning and how that impacts us. So I look forward to that, because having watched the meetings, I still don't really feel like I'm any further forward in my knowledge of affordable housing, which is hard because the whole point is I'm going to be voting on things related to affordable housing, and I like to be knowledgeable about that. And obviously, I've tried to educate myself, but it's a large topic. And every time I hear something, my head swirls. And so the nuts and bolts of what you think we need to know is super important. So I hope that happens. I hope some data is involved in that. What is our subsidized housing inventory? Who's monitoring that? We don't have anybody currently monitoring that in the town, so how do we know that the data we have is up to date? It turns into our regulatory agreements. We have units that are affordable that currently don't have anyone living in them, and we don't really have a method with which we can say, you know, we've given you this opportunity to build in our town, you've said it will be affordable, and now they sit empty. So that's something that concerns me from a zoning level, but it also has to do with your committee. You know, short-term rentals, seasonal workers. I thought maybe there might be some exchange of ideas about other, you know, cities and communities that have dealt with some of these issues, and looking broadly at what things have worked in other places, maybe something out of P-Town or something out of Aspen. So I'm hoping that the committee might do a little more research and dig a little deeper and bring some more things forward, because as Betty said, it could be something small, it might be something big. But in all honesty, having listened to most of the meetings, I don't really feel that I'm any further forward. And I feel like it's almost like we need to throw these three things out there and let's get a whiteboard up and put it on the whiteboard. But I don't feel like you've even set the table to be able to make a decision. And that kind of upsets me, because this whole committee I felt would be the deep dive into that, to narrow that down. And if a counselor wanted to take the time to listen to the tape, always there to spend time to look at that information and become better educated. Because obviously when we're on the dais, we don't have the time to go deep dive into it. So I kind of felt like this would be an opportunity for that. And I feel like so far, I'm not really that much further forward, which is kind of a bummer.
Well, I want to jump on something you said, not jump on you or something
No,
you said.
okay.
But in other words, half of the problem that we have when we come up with ideas, we realize that some zoning or some regulation has been put in place. So although we're working on a lot of things, but take the Army, for example, perfect place, but there's restrictions. They put it up for this. So everything we think we have to put out there, we're running into old restrictions or old zoning problems or old, you know what I mean? Whatever the case may be. So over the years, while all these committees and the zoning and all these people were setting up things, they dug themselves into a hole. You know, so certain committees are expected to find the answers. Because I think everyone on this committee is really, really trying to, you know, I mean, I run my mouth just because I get so teed off about everything. I'm sorry, I do. But this committee cares, and it's a hard-working committee, and they're trying to find the answers. You know, but you can't find an answer if when you halfway down the page you realize, oh, in 1987 this was put in place and we can't change it. Well, you know, see, my belief is you can change it. You know, so that's where we fight. But, and I know I bother some of my committee members because I talk quite a bit, but that's okay, because I'm going to still be me.
I definitely agree with you. I think if the recommendation is we need to do this thing in this area and it would require a zoning change, I know there's projects coming forward in Jeff Mendez's precinct that may require a zoning change in order to get that done. So I don't think anybody's against a zoning change. So I would recommend that. So, I mean, I think it has to be thoughtful and have a reason. It's not just because we want, you know, to build more market rate housing, for sure. I mean, I think if it supported affordable housing, you know, the council would listen. I mean, I think the council's job is to listen to anything, obviously, but I just would hope that we look at some different solutions that maybe we're not even aware of, or that are outside of our toolbox currently, because obviously we're not the only community that's struggling with housing. So it requires some effort to maybe think outside of what we currently using. But even just understanding the Marston's Mills process, well, what are the different options there? You know, how do we take a town-owned piece of land and, I mean, we're kind of late to the game on that. It was set back in 2021, so here we are, it's on our lap, and we're kind of tasked with this process. But it's like, well, what could we do with a town-owned piece of land? What would that look like? I am not a housing expert, I'm not a development expert. That's why I'm looking, you know, to the people that are here in the chairs and maybe reaching out to the people. I mean, Laura Schufelt obviously has a great knowledge, and she could explain, well, one option might be this. Maybe we have a developer explain one option could be this. These are the funding sources available. I mean, I feel like it's changing fairly rapidly because we have new leadership, you know, in the state level. So I just hope that the committee will bring that forward so that people can have a better understanding, not just me, but people that might be watching this, or that we refer them to this, because this is a place to do that deep dive that we don't always get on the dais, because it's short and orderly and doesn't lend itself well to the kind of conversations that you're having here, which I appreciate that you're having this go-between. It's the part of government that doesn't get to always be done. So I appreciate the effort that you're doing. And I don't want to say you're not working hard, because, you know, I know you are. I'm just giving you my experience as the person outside of here who's going to be up on the dais making decisions, hopefully based on the information that you're bringing forward, that I think is important for me to have.
When I heard the council ask for this last week, it's something I hadn't thought of, and I don't think any of us had. But I think actually the result is going to be more inclination for the council to act on things, because they'll understand more than they understand now. And education has that effect on you sometimes. And so I'm really, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be work that I will enjoy doing, because I think it actually will be something that I was calling marketing at one time here, that we have to market what we're doing because people won't do it unless we're marketing. We're a country of marketing. It isn't just marketing, it's education and understanding and comprehending how something works. And, you know, it's on the complicated side, sure, but it will be very interesting. And I don't know whether it's actually a responsibility of this committee to spend, I mean, are we going to go beyond the end of March, you know, doing this? Maybe, I don't know. We won't go but we'll get all the standard stuff done before it, but I'm not sure that, not that we have to do it as an emergency, but because we got time, but it'll happen.
There you go. Nice to have a green light. Any event, I'm looking at a big picture and a little picture. The big picture goes back to the scope and the purpose of the ad hoc committees. And I'm not going to criticize anybody for doing it. I'm just saying it started off with a defined, I'm trying to think of the word that Paula used, a target, a task, whatever word you want to use, because you had to come up with something. The other thing that happened, there's only 2 committees that have people beyond the town council members on it, you and zoning. I don't know aware of anybody else that's got it. And I think that blend of minds and thought is what's exposing and bringing out these issues. Zoning's been dealing with forfeiture, not forfeiture, for enforcement. That's the discussion they brought that issue to light. But you guys are bringing forth way more than just a singular issue. We need more of Mary Ann type people around. Nothing against the rest of you, but she's the ability to focus and describe it, so then we adopt it. I would like, and I talked with Rick the other day about this, so it's not a trade secret. But I think that what I'm recommending and considering for you is to look at the timeline, which is the end of March. What can you do with that? Can you come up with a method by which you can decide where are you now? What can you make a recommendation? But the other thing to do is to go back in front of town council and say, we need to enlarge the scope of our project, but not necessarily now. We need to set the stage for the sequel to where you are. If you identify what you can solve now, or at least come close, and say, these are the other 4, 5, 6 issues that we want to tackle immediately in phase number 2. That might be a method of taking the monkey off your back, getting the decisions resolved. The 5, 6, 7 of you may go with that. You may decide, okay, I've had enough now, let's get some other people. That's up to you how you do it. But I'm recommending that you do that. I came in, started sitting down an hour and a half ago, thinking of 2 words. One was needs and the other is location. Those really don't mean anything anymore because the needs are pervasive everywhere and the location is sort of like how many fingernails you're going to have today, 2 or 3 or 10. You know, I mean, and that's what you're dealing with on the location side. So if those thoughts are beneficial to you, I encourage you, if you want my help, I'll give it to you. You know that, I give help to anybody. But I think what I'm looking at is to try to take the monkey off your back by coming up with what you can deal with and say, this is the furthest we could get at this time. And then from there, it's gonna be a sequel. There's gonna be a sequel on zoning. Some of the other ad hoc committees have got to start bringing the public into those committees. They're just not getting enough feedback, and they're relying on the internal information, which is not the way to go. So those are my thoughts. I hope they help.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, but if you knew how many tomatoes I'd learned how to duck, you wouldn't say that. Oh, yeah, right. I know how to duck.
Is there any more public comment? Only took an hour. What's an hour, you know? Okay, well, thank you very much. You know, public comment for me is an important part of life. That is listening to other people and how they think about something and shoving that into your brain to see how that affects how you're thinking about it. And certainly that's been my career, and I appreciate it. It does sometimes take you away from the core work you expected to get done in these 2 hours, but it also gives you something that makes you the results of your work better than they would have otherwise been. And I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, folks. Back to the list. As I remember when we do the number one thing on my list, and not number one in terms of priorities, but just a list that I made a couple of meetings ago. The first one was the Armory. But as I remember, there was a comment about the Armory. Does anybody remember what it was, why it was difficult or impossible to do? Does anybody remember what was said?
Well, I said it. It has to do with, it was, I think, through the state legislature. The Armory could only be used for municipal purposes or for a for-profit museum. So to Marianne's point, you'd have to go back, I think, to the state legislature, but I'm not the expert. You have to ask David Anthony. He would have the answer on that. But it has a very limited usage. I also believe there's hazardous material in there, but I'm not convinced of that. I don't know.
If it has to be part of a museum, well, why can't we, when we make it a homeless shelter, teach everybody how to draw, bring artwork? I'm serious. I mean,
Well, somebody ought to be doing the research on the
Right.
what you
I
said.
know that sounds crazy to say, but I
He'd
mean,
be the logical one to do the research, but maybe you'd like to do it if you had help. I don't know.
yeah, no, I would do it. But I would, you help me, right?
Sure.
This is my buddy here.
You could
I
do some
beat him
research
up.
for the next meeting. We'll get back to it and talk
Okay.
about it. Okay?
Because, yeah, and I think if we have to change it, and I think a lot of things may have to be changed on the Cape,
Sure.
because that's the brick wall that everyone's hitting, and I think all committees hit it. It's like they put so many zones here and so many things that all these buildings, there are so many empty buildings, that it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thanks.
But should we work with me on that?
Number 2 and 3 are pretty much the same, and that is make Airbnb only for year-round rentals and regulatory structure for short-term rentals. The short-term rental issue is a very significant issue here on the Cape and in the town of Barnstable. It's a controversial one, obviously, but maybe we should have a little discussion about that right now and see how important it is. I think Laura said, Schufeld said there's only 3 to 5% that are short-term rentals here, so what's the big deal in going into a big battle over that? But 3 to 5 is still probably a significant number. So any comment about that as we go through this list?
Well, that's why I brought up earlier. I think there's nothing wrong with pursuing a bunch of little things. But, you know, these little ones tend to be more difficult because they involve a regulatory structure. I know there was an effort in the town to come up with a regulatory structure for short-term rentals, and that was set aside. You know, perhaps the work that was set aside could be looked at again. I think it's worth it to have a regulatory structure. I think having no regulatory structure is not an answer. So I'd like to put it forward that we have a regulatory structure for that.
Can you do a little thought about that and come back with a little more information? Is that unfair?
Yeah, I suppose I could, yeah.
I mean, the next one is one we've all talked about a lot. They transfer tax on real estate, and I assume what that means is when you're selling your house, you pay a fee. And maybe there's a price level on it, maybe there isn't. And that money would be used for housing stuff. So let's talk about that.
Paula, aren't you going to offer something with Gordon? I'm not sure. Oh.
So you know a lot about this. Do you have any comments about it?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Is it something we ought to postpone talking about? Well, what it would be is when people sell a house, they got to pay.
Oh, no, I know that, but I'm saying.
And obviously, taxes are not popular these days, so it would be controversial.
You know, I'd like to say something about this, and we have some other strategies Paula put together this about, in general, increasing revenue for affordable housing. I think, you know, fundraising, you know, I'll call this fundraising, ought to be attached to significant goals, achievable goals, you know, putting more of our CPA money towards that. It's, what are we doing? We're going to give it all to the Affordable Housing Trust? Are we going to do that? Is that the goal of the fundraising? So I think, you know, the fundraising is an aspect, but it's very important to say what the fundraising is going to. If we give it to the Affordable Housing Trust, what are we asking them to do? Can we ask them to do anything? How independent are they? Is it up to them to make decisions? Is that what this money is going towards? What are their mechanisms? And it would certainly be helpful if we had a housing coordinator in the town. You know, Kristen had talked about, you know, having the expertise. It's very difficult for this committee to do that. But if we actually had a housing coordinator in the town, then we would rely on that person for the expertise. We wouldn't be having to, you know, parse it out amongst ourselves. You know, that person would be the repository. And that, to me, should be one of our number one strategies, is you do whatever you can do to hire someone and fill that vacancy. So that would be my comment. You know, where does the money go? It's all good to put these taxes on. Other communities have done it, but where does it go?
So that's you got to number 6, hiring a staff person to do work in the affordable housing area, doing several dimensions of things, including enforcing the affordability. And I think we probably all agree on that.
Right, that it would go
I don't think we need to talk about that. That's simple and clear, and since we're losing units that way, it makes complete sense. Okay?
I agree.
What about adding to that, under Paula's thing, prioritize operating funds to support the administration of housing programs, development, monitoring, et cetera?
Is he online? Someone has a question. That's what we're hearing, I think.
It's my phone
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought somebody was asking for, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I said what I,
So read that again, a little louder.
you know, to expand a little bit on 6, hire a staff person to monitor affordable compliance. I like the way Paula has worded this under align town resources. Number 2, prioritize operating funds to support the administration of housing programs, development monitoring, et cetera. I think that's a how to do it, as well as, you know, not just saying we're going to hire somebody, you know, but how do we hire this person? We have to bring it to the town
Yeah.
council and
Yeah, that's another
prioritize
step towards
operating funds.
defining what the
Yeah.
person will do, and that's a good thing to have.
Well, if we're hiring them, wouldn't we have to say what their responsibilities would be?
We're not hiring them, but we are defining what we think they should be doing, and the council will make its own decision.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if we're going to the council to ask them to hire
Yeah.
somebody, obviously, wouldn't we put forth what we're looking for that person's criteria to be?
You mean what their qualifications are, what they would be doing?
Well, yeah, qualifications, but I'm saying the criteria as far as all the different things that they have to.
Yes, definitely.
So,
And Paula has started that here.
right, so I mean,
Yeah.
okay, no, it sounded like you were concerned about still, after we hired them, you know what I mean, will they still be doing what is expected? But if we're going to the town to say, please hire them, then we would obviously tell the town what we want them to do. And I think if the town's going to hire them, obviously they would take recommendation on what we're looking for them to do. That way, we know the money is going for affordable housing.
Well, Marion, the job description is already written, and there's already been rounds where people have been interviewed, but we haven't hired. So the position exists. We had a housing coordinator who left some years ago. I'm just saying we need to emphasize to the staff, it's really their responsibility, Mr. Ells and his staff, to hire someone. And if it takes a more creative, I don't know what it takes, but we can't keep accepting that we can't find anyone. It's an unacceptable answer. That's what I'm saying. It's unacceptable because it has created all of this. I mean, to a large degree, that we have no resident expertise here in the town.
Yeah, I happen to agree with the hiring of a staff person. And that person can also help our planning director actually do an inventory of SHI as we have it. And that's something we really need to have a base on, is what we have and what have we've lost, and if we can actually preserve that from happening in the future, losing units that have agreements with the town. So I'd be for that.
Yeah, Jim Kupfer does some of this now, but having a person do the comprehensive thing on both ends, that is, the early on in the development process and then after it's developed, maintaining the affordability. It's a lot of work, so.
Well, obviously, there's a need for somebody to do that, and I think we've had that opening for quite a while, and we'll have to figure out a way to either incentivize it for further for people who want to apply and take the job.
Well, you know, it runs into one of the problems that we're talking about, and housing's so expensive that people we get from off Cape can't come here and do it. That's the problem. I'm sure that was part of the problem originally, 2 or 3 years ago.
Let Cindy do it. She does everything else. She can handle it. No, I'm teasing. She was so deep in her paper, I had to say something.
It's actually the chart that was given to all you guys. I don't know who's talking, but can they turn their microphone?
Yeah, you gotta turn the chart that we were given was some of that work that we were just talking about the person doing. And I appreciate having this. I think this is gonna be something that we look at when we go home. You know, there's a lot of tiny type here and a lot of things to think about with it. I got here early and looked at some of it, and it really, for the audience, it's a summary of all of the affordable housing that has been built since 2017, and facts about it, how many affordable units and those kinds of things and where it is. So it's stuff that's very important to us, but it's been put together in a way that it needs to be on a bed sheet or something to be big enough to really read.
Just so the folks at home know what it is that you're talking about, it can also be found on the Planning and Development website
Yeah,
under their housing development program.
yeah, I've seen it.
All the
Yeah.
reports are there, which is what I printed out for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is a good document to look at. It's mostly with what's come in the recent past. And what we were talking about is having an inventory of everything we've had, no matter when it came up. So this is helpful. I think it'd be fleshed out by somebody who'd do that.
This kind of, in a lot of places, gives you the sad fact of the small number of affordable units in many of these developments is one of the things on our list we might as well jump into. That we could define what affordability means at different levels of income and percentages of income and so forth, to encourage or to try to convince the various departments to not approve projects that don't do those things, and allow people with a variety of incomes, including poor people and police and fire and nurses and those people who also can't buy a house here, and it's hard to get people to come here and so forth and so on, so that there would be places for them too. And that's what this sheet of paper helps us understand better. And one of the numbers on here talks about this, whatever number it is. Increase the percentage of affordable housing units proposed in developments with perhaps incentives. Incentives, I guess, means, I think means that you may end up requiring a builder to do more units than they can do because they can't afford it, and if so, is there a source of subsidy for that developer or a slight reduction in their taxes or whatever it is, so you can get more affordables? That's what that incentive means, I think. So we could talk about that for a minute.
Well, I think it speaks to the third thing on Paula's list is the inclusionary ordinance. And I think we've had a lot of people speak on this, and I think we ought to recommend a scalable ordinance that the more units, the more affordable. Again, I give the example of Hanover, and we talked about, Councilor Turkelson talked about changing zoning. We changed the zoning there. The only one who didn't vote to change it is Councilor Clark. The rest of the councilors voted to change that. And, you know, we could have put a much higher level in there. We didn't. I think we did the 13 in there. Could have been higher. And now we're faced with the second phase there. And this is a massive corporation building this. And they can absorb this. And our little guys are not going to build these massive buildings. And we ought to think about that. I think we ought to put some numbers down and put them forward and just get it done. I think the zoning ordinance or the inclusionary ordinance is something we need to recommend putting forward, and put some numbers, stop talking about it, put some numbers down, and get moving forward. I know when we did the zoning overlay again on the mall, I wanted to put a much higher number there, but that wasn't supported. You know, when we're doing these things, we have to do this. And, you know, which gets to my point that I've made several times is I kind of like 40Bs because they're at least 20-25% affordable. That's where I think we should be. So I don't even know if I want a housing production plan if the goal of that is to protect us from 40Bs. You know, if we get the 40Bs, we're going to get the numbers we need. You know, if we're getting up to mandating 20%, then that's a 40B. So that's my thoughts on that.
Paul, I've been looking at your suggestions here. You're looking for higher revenue and a certain other, for affordable housing. Would that be something that you would be, you think that the funds could go to, is when we have a problem with developers coming and they cannot make the numbers meet with a higher inclusionary percentage? Would that be something you suggest would be a good use of the funds?
This is an issue has been debated at the Affordable Housing Trust, which again is separate from the council and its decision-making. I tend to think that the inclusionary zoning is a density relief, and therefore there shouldn't be additional financial subsidy. However, the trust is kind of moving in a direction where they might be providing financial subsidy for inclusionary units. They haven't to date, but that's always a possibility. I think that if we have a revised inclusionary policy, we may also recommend that for those that are deeper discounted, that maybe additional financial subsidy could be provided through some of these funding mechanisms.
Okay, when you're talking about density relief, to have a higher density per acre to allow more units to be built in there and it would be more affordable for the builder?
Well,
What exactly do you mean by
the inclusionary zoning is anything that has 10 units or greater requires an affordable unit, and that actually is across our entire town. So, and that was really to try to drive toward more affordable units without having to have a 40B or without having to change zoning in different places. So it's a tool that's used in other communities to try to recognize that if you're building a denser development, that there's some cost savings on a per square footage basis, and therefore at least some of those units should be affordable. But there are some economic parameters, and I know Laura Schufelt has talked about that, on, you can't push it too far. I mean, we have to deal with the reality of construction costs, land costs. You can want to ask for more affordability, but the feasibility of any one project might not make it without deep subsidies either provided through tax credits, state grants, others, low-interest loans, subsidies from the municipality that could come either from our Affordable Housing Trust, additional CPA funds. So I think this strategy of increasing revenue isn't necessarily targeting how it gets spent. It's just saying we need more to subsidize, because the gap between incomes and housing costs, both home ownership and rental are real. And people can't make it. I mean, they're not paying 30% of their income now for their housing costs. People are paying 50, 60% of their income for housing. It's not sustainable.
So while you're talking, Paula, your number 3 there is recommend amount or percentage of CPC funding that's annually allocated for housing. So you're saying that we should officially increase the percentage of the CPC money for housing?
The purpose of writing these down was trying to capture the conversation we had last meeting.
Yep.
And knowing that some of these would have to be, as you said, there might have to be further refinement on exactly what we're talking about and discussion, because I'm not sure this is a consensus position. And Councilor Lutke had raised some concerns that she didn't want to target certain money to housing if it's at the cost of historic or open space, and we all are going to have different opinions on that. Laura brought up that historically, the amount of funding that came from the land bank and the CPC has predominantly gone to open space and historic, and it would be perhaps a redistribution back, to housing if we allocated a higher percentage, on an annual basis going to
Still a
housing.
minimum of 10%?
Well, the state requires that you have to fund 10%, a minimum of 10% for each of those categories.
Yes.
Then that leaves 70%. That is really a first come, first serve basis. So if open space projects come or historic projects come, we have recently been giving fairly large allocations of funding from the CPC to the Affordable Housing Trust. For the most part, I agree with that. I do have some concerns that the council no longer has any input into the decisions on what projects are actually funded by the Affordable Housing Trust. I mean, basically, once the money goes there, we're not involved at all. It has also led to the CPC not entertaining new housing projects. And there's nothing that restricts the CPC from looking at housing projects that aren't going before the Affordable Housing Trust. So
do you think the council should have a weigh-in opinion on each one of these projects?
not necessarily, but, and I think Town Manager Els recently spoke with us about having more of a dialogue in terms of, because policy-wise on how the trust might want to be managing its priorities and its funding.
So my question is, over the last 25 years, there's been a lot of land conservation. I'm not opposed to it. I'm very much in favor of it, but one would think that right now it may be that the housing problem, the land problem was up here and the housing was down here, and now it's changed a little bit. And I don't mean to offend the conservation people, because that's tremendously important too. And since I'm president of the Historic Association in Marston's Mills these days, I am concerned about antiquities and preservation of those houses occasionally that come up that you can't save because you don't have the money. And but I do think that housing has moved ahead of both of those in terms of the crisis we have in housing. And so I would consider, going 20% housing, for example, or something like that. But I'm just expressing a poorly thought out opinion.
Truthfully, for us to make a recommendation that actually has a number attached to it, I think we would need some additional data in terms of historically, where has all the funds gone, and include land bank, and Mark Milne has all of that. It's not,
Yeah.
that information is available. But there have been communities, and I think Provincetown is one of them, that they've allocated, and maybe several on the Cape have made commitments that affordable housing gets a certain percentage of the CPC funding right off the top. So there's not.
I mean, a bigger percentage than 10% is what you're
Yes, absolutely. And in some cases, I mean, P-Town may not actually have that much open space to preserve it. I mean,
No, that's true.
between the National Seashore and other efforts,
Yeah,
there
good time.
probably isn't as much demand for open space as there is for housing. So every community is going to look at this a little differently. And some might argue that we don't want to tie our hands, but on the other hand, you may want to say that this is a priority, and we're going to show you it's a priority by making sure that some of these funds are directed toward housing. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly,
I was just going to say, I don't think the Affordable Housing Trust has any other source of income other than CPC. Is that accurate?
At the moment, they don't. There have been actually, there are other sources. In fact, the redevelopment of the mall across, what's that called? The Landing. So under the new lease terms, there is money that is being provided directly into this Affordable Housing Trust. So I think $500,000 a year for the next 5 years. So they're going to be able to, so they do have another revenue source. So the trust is set up with the ability to receive money from lots of different sources. If we were to go forward with some type of transfer tax, we might decide that the trust gets half of whatever that revenue is. I mean, just like we make and we could have made a decision on the short-term rental revenue. So there's the 6% additional revenue that's local option. At the time, we made a decision that all of it would go toward wastewater and water. I had requested that housing be an option for the fund that was created, but that was not approved by a majority of the council at the time. So there are other sources that we could create for revenue for housing. And whether it goes directly to the trust or whether it's, stays within the control of the council is another question.
One of the problems with housing that isn't quite the same as land conservation or and the antiquities is the housing continues perpetually, and the others are oftentimes one at a time. So that the housing, if you're subsidizing half a dozen units in a given project, it's going to go on pretty much forever. And that makes it much more expensive and different.
Well, generally, you're putting the money up front as a one-time cost, expense. You're having a deed restriction to preserve the affordability into the future. But unless you're providing rental assistance or some type of annual assistance, it's a one-time expense.
Yeah. So that is a limiting factor, because not everybody's going to have rental assistance, particularly if we talk about different percentages that go beyond rental assistance, which we are talking about.
Well, the theory is that if you create a unit that restricts the income to be 60, 65, 70, 80% of AMI, you back into what the rent is affordable to that income. And so that's, and for the developer, whoever is, if it's a private landlord, they're going to have a cash flow that supports that discounted rent. And you're kind of front-loading the money so that they can have that cash flow and make sense for them. So to me, it's not a bad way to use money. The question is, how much does any one development need? And that is a very subjective, often, analysis. And so what ends up happening is we just make, we say, here's what we can give you, or up to, and guess what people ask for? They ask for the maximum every single time. Of course. And we generally, our review of cash flow and operating statements sort of accepts what we're provided. I know when the state reviews their applications, they tend to have a lot more questions in terms of the assumptions that are being made. So.
Thank you. The next one is create zoning flexibility allowing duplexes. And of course, I don't know if that means everywhere or some places or whatever. And
I want to make sure I understand what this means. You want to make sure we can actually relay that to
Your microphone. Yeah.
It's on? Oh, put it on. Sickening. I'm sorry. Okay, is it, I want to make sure I understand this. As we said, zoning has dug a hole. We know that. So we want to put duplexes in different places, so we're going to have to change the zoning. That's what this is asking us to do. You already know my feeling. Of course, I want to say change every bit of zoning that they have. They changed it when it was convenient for them. I mean, they did. I mean, so yeah, we should go after it.
for better or worse, the problem I think with this one is it won't fly. I mean, you may have a place, an area or two you can do this in, but people will go absolutely berserk.
See, that's where I think you and I differ so much, because I don't care.
Well, no,
If
I'm
they go berserk.
reflecting the reality of a democracy where
Well, no,
you make decisions based on what the majority of the
okay,
people want.
I can respect that, okay?
I didn't
Believe
make
me.
that system, but
No, I understand that. I can respect that 100%. But right now, we are talking about housing.
yeah, I know.
We are talking about lives. We're not talking about a place to put a swing set or a kite or a tree. We're talking about lives. So, you know, when zoning did its thing, like I said, the one advantage that a lot of us in Hyannis have, and many of us have, is we've been here all our lives. You know, so no, I'm just going to finish my statement, because a lot of this business zoning that they have, oh, that's the business district. It wasn't always. Homes lived there. Homes were there. I lived on one of those spots. Now, they changed it for their liking. So now that we're trying to get something set up to save other people.
Well, my opinion is not a personal opinion.
Oh, no, I understand that.
I don't have to put another house attached to mine if the law passes, but what I'm saying is, we originally agreed that we would submit things to the council that are likely to happen, and not things that were just good ideas. My only comment is, I don't think this would happen. It's just my opinion. I may be wrong.
Right.
It may even be wrong about, maybe we should submit things we think are important, even if they won't happen.
Yes, because I guess my belief is it can happen and it will happen. You know, because I guess what's so sad, we just have to fight it to make it happen, is the people that are going to be opposed to it. The majority of the people that are opposed to it are the people that came into the village, came into the town, came from their other homes, who made the Cape into a city, and now they're calling the shots. I mean, and that's the truth. That is the truth. So, no. I mean, it depends on how hard you want to fight and how hard you believe in something. And I'm not taking nothing you said, because everything you said was correct.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah.
But it really does, it depends on what you believe in. And to me, people not dying and people having a place to live is more important than what kind of car someone in Hyannis drives or what private road. And that sounds very, very cold, but that is where I'm at from my heart. I don't care. And that sounds negative and cold. I am for every human being walking on the face of the earth. But if you have 10 sandwiches and you can't afford to give up one to some kid you see digging out of a garbage can, I don't have time to talk to you. And that's basically where we're at. We have all these rich people who don't like the homeless and don't want them anywhere near them, but won't create anything to help. If they do, it's like, here, put them in the dungeon over here. No, we're all human beings. Like I said, we are a paycheck away. Half of the people living are, well, maybe one or two paychecks. I can't speak for everyone, but we are them. And we need to understand it, I think. Not us, not you. I'm talking about, when I say we, I'm talking about the community. Not we on this board, because I think this board understands it. But as a community, we have to fight back. And it's not like we're asking for permission, and that's the mistake, I think, that people make. It's when you put something forth, you're almost begging, can I have this? I'm not begging. This is what's needed. These people have to get out the street, so we're going to put this proposal on the table. Are you with us, or are we going to have to fight you? And we'll stand toe-to-toe, months to help. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to, I'm sorry, oh my goodness, but I just need people to understand.
Yeah.
You know, and I think maybe that's what I meant when I said at one meeting, I think a lot of these committees have people who've never been hungry, who've never been homeless, who've never been scared, who've never slept next to a dumpster. And so when you have to experience that, you understand why it's not a choice. There's not a choice in this. And I appreciate what the gentleman was saying out there, but I want to tell you, thank you for that, but I'm one in a million. There's so many out there who act just like me and have the same feelings that I do. But they had some make-believe concept because they were given that concept that to be on these kind of boards, you have to be some kind of special super genius. And that's not true. You know, and I think the boards were designed to make people say, stay away. Not this one, but I'm talking about in the past, just in general. But when I hear those terms of, and Rick, I love you. You know I love you. I do. You've been a fighter forever. But I don't know the term of giving up. I never have. Anyone that knows me knows I do not give up. And like I said, I learned how to duck tomatoes because I won't give up. So please, don't think in those terms. I think we should put to the town council things that we believe can happen. And why can't this happen?
Yeah.
Why? Why can't it happen? Duplex? Why? Because Tom Jones, you see I like Tom Jones, but Tom Jones won't like it?
Yeah, I would say, I think what we're talking about is multifamily by right zoning. And I wouldn't support it, Mary Ann, because I think there's something very nice about the single-family zoning, the neighborhoods. I certainly understand the history there, the bias, the redlining. That is absolutely accurate and factual. But there also is something very nice about that, and we don't, you know, you read the statistics, I don't know it off the top of my head, what they say, maybe 90% is our single family. I think we've done the duplex with the ADU regulatory structure. So anybody could do a duplex by building an ADU. But who can build an ADU? It's like $500,000. In my neighborhood, I know a woman, she rents out 2 apartments, one in her house and one a little carriage house. Just down the road, there's an apartment up and down. And then a 40B was done that developed some condos, and one of those is affordable. So if people want to come in and do multifamily and our single family, they can do 40Bs. It's available to them. Anyone can do that. That was done. That was Stuart Bornstein that came in and did a 40B and built those condos. So I'm with Rick. I can't see my constituents doing that. I have a ton, in my precinct, I probably have more apartment buildings than anybody else, except, you know, maybe Barnstable's getting quite a few with those big ones back there, the Everly and the Hanover. But in West Main is covered with multifamily apartments, absolutely covered with it. And the neighborhoods, single family, are really struggling. So that's something I agree with Rick. It's just once we do that, then, you know, that option is gone forever once you do that. And as I say, I don't think it has to be a racist argument to maintain single-family zoning in this town.
I'm a racist, is that what you said? Argument?
Yes, it's been well publicized
Well,
through
that's-
hack that single-family zoning is racist. Yes, that is the statement that has been made.
Right at the moment, I'm not trying to bring up any, we know because once they get done with people of color, they're going to go after poor white people. I mean, let's just be real with it. People who run this town need somebody to attack. And when they get rid of people of color, they're going after the poor white people. So I'm out here fighting for people that are poor and people of color, okay? Now, what I guess what I'm looking at in this statement is creating the zoning flexibility, allowing it. I'm not saying it has to be, but to create the zoning, change the zoning, allow people to do it. That's the word I'm looking at. It's to allow. Now, if it works to put people off the street, I just need people to know off the top. That's where I'm at. And that's the thing. And just to tell zoning back up. change what you're doing, allow this to happen. You know, I mean, do you know how many discussions people in this community have had, and we laugh about it when we go down, and I'm not trying to take away from the tourists, but when you go down South Street and you look at all the beautiful things that were put in for the tourists, we crack up. We laugh. It's like, yes, they take care of them really good. You know, I mean, really well. And it's there were just certain things that everyday people who live here, yeah, they get a lot of the benefit, but not as much as they should for the way the tourists and everybody is treated, and we're put on the back burner. They did everything to keep people off of Main Street. Thank goodness they started opening up things. I'm getting off track, and I'm sorry. But I want them to allow zoning to change to allow it. That's my thing. I have a problem with zoning in general. I do. I really do. Because it was designed for no other reason other than to keep people out.
Yeah. The problem I have with the term zoning flexibility is, you know, it can be used to loosen things up to the point where a person could make a duplex and a family wouldn't be going into that other part of the building. It would be used for a short-term rental or something like that, and that defeats the purpose of it. It takes another, you know, unit off the market for the people that need it.
I could appreciate what everyone's saying. I guess I just have a problem whenever I hear the word allow. I'm going to allow you to do something. You say I have a problem with authority. No. But I understand what you're saying. I guess my biggest concern is making sure I think we can put regulations on how many, you know what I mean? Yeah. But to say they're not allowed because of the zoning, I think that's messed up. That's just my opinion. Oh, I'm sorry. You were next.
Yeah, I have to agree with Charlie and Betty on this one. I'll tell you why. I think my village is a good example of this, that the duplexes will be market rate, and they'll also be built and bought and purchased and taken advantage of by outside investors who will do that, and they'll maximize what they can get for rent. It's just the capitalist system, and those will become short-term rentals. And that's just the way it is in this, what we've done. I think one of the things we can do, and I think we should do it for any future, we should have done it for all the building we've come up with lately, is require that they won't be allowed short-term rentals in those properties. Because I see a lot of this. There's just an article the other day in the Wall Street Journal, and it talks about basically an overabundance of fancy apartments. And a lot of the vacancies are going up. There was a push in the last number of years to build high-end apartments for younger people who could afford that, and the market has changed. Where now there's a glut of those. Okay, we're finding that I think I've heard one of the properties on Falmouth Road here in Hyannis or Centerville may be up for sale, and they have a gentleman came here the other day talking about it has a 13% vacancy rate. Now, we've built in our building about 1,000 apartments here. Okay, if I was coming here to this vacation place, we are a vacation destination, is that if I was going to buy one of those, I'd buy it for the months I was going to use it, and then short-term rent it for the others. And that's just the most, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, I'm saying that's the most economical thing for a person to do, logically. Okay, you can maximize what your investment is and help pay off your mortgage if you have one. And I think that's one of the problems we're going to find out, and that this is not going to solve any of the problems. It's going to just allow, and the other thing is it's by right. Okay, we say, we'll say we got a few and we'll allow us only a few, but no, this is what we're proposing here is by right from now into the future. So anybody who wants to come in, no matter how many there are already there, will be able to do so. And most of these people will be investors to do this from out of town or other places, and they will be maximizing their return on their investment. And that's what they're doing. So just a practical point of view of that, I think that precludes that from being popular. I know it's not popular in my town, and I think we should be putting things here on our list that will actually have a chance of going through. I just don't think that has a chance. And I know for a fact in my village, and there's other villages too, I live in Osstville, and that it's going to be the same thing or close to the same thing. Okay, and it's hard to put restrictions on some of these things that won't let them go through the roof. And if you can get 2 rents out of a piece of land versus 1, you're much better off. And that's the highest, best use financially of somebody who wants to invest in that. And I think that's what we'll be opening the door for. And I'm afraid that's a non-starter, and it's not going to help the situation.
Well, I had said in the beginning that I would stick with the majority. I would not go against the majority as long as the majority is truly fighting for the people. And I believe this board is. I don't have no question about anyone here. So I won't go against the majority on that because you guys are still fighting. So I'll roll along with that one. I mean, you guys know that. I am with the majority. If it was not for fighting, if I thought any fashion, way, or form, it was to knock out helping somebody, then, but the way you guys are putting it, it makes sense. I can see where it would hurt more than help. You know, at least the way you just put it, you know, and I hope I'm hearing you right, you know.
Well, thank you. The duplexes are not allowed by right at this point, but I know 3 that are in Osstville. And 1 is long-term rented, okay? The other ones are owned by realtors that own both of the units, and they short-term rent. And that's what we're going to get out of this, I'm afraid. I'd like to see that, like I said, as we approve and push through more of these buildings, I think we should have some kind of a say, as we do as a town, in permitting and say, these units cannot be used to be short-term rented. Therefore, the people who will be incentivized to move in here will be year-round people in a lot of these buildings. We don't have it in some of the buildings we already have, and to tell you the truth, looking at the market, I think people are not going to choose Hyannis year-round with the money. They're going to live somewhere south and come back up here like they do all over the Cape. And that's what's going to happen unless we say, hey, you can't, we've got to put a stipulation on new building that says no short terms in that building, and it'll incentivize
Change
people
some
to
of
buy
it,
for a
right.
home.
So we're running out of time. Let's do one more, and then we're going to.
I'd like to make a comment. Counselor Crowe had brought up something. It wasn't, it was a response to the strategies that I had mailed out this morning regarding zoning changes possibly being done in concert with the local comprehensive plan. I think we shouldn't narrow our conversation about zoning changes to just duplexes or just retaining single family across the entire community. I think there are places where density is appropriate based on our infrastructure, and infrastructure meaning sewer, transportation, and walkability. I think that we would be missing opportunities to create housing that is not only in demand, but is more likely to be affordable across, the income categories that we're looking at, both from more deeply affordable to our working, however we want to call that, our people who can't really qualify for deed restricted, but need affordable, reasonable rental or home ownership opportunities. So I think the strategy that we recommend should be broader, and that's why I was sort of taking the language that Laura had shared with us last week in terms of some flexibility. I don't think this is the entity that should be figuring out what that zoning should look like, but I think we would be short-sighted if we didn't put that on the table, because it's been discussed in our housing production plan, it is being discussed in our LCPC, And I think we're a little stuck in our past by not exploring other housing options. And as, Councilor Lutke had said, there is denser housing in her precinct. There is denser housing in Councilor Crow's precinct, in different places. In some places, it feels like it's okay. It's in the village center. It allows for walkability. It allows for maybe not having more than one vehicle. So I think that we should include that. There's been discussions about, short-term rental regulations. There was a lot of conversation, as you have noted, several years ago about that. The biggest challenge for us regulating short-term rentals was the difficulty in passing a zoning ordinance that would accompany a general ordinance regulating short-term rentals. And there wasn't an appetite on the council to pass a zoning ordinance. So that was the main reason why we didn't move forward on any regulations for short-term rentals at the time. However, we did make a significant commitment of resources to procuring a software vendor to monitor and help us. We required all short-term rentals to be registered with the town, which had not previously been required. We have a mechanism in which we can determine if people are in compliance with that registration. We have a hotline for people to register their complaints if a short-term rental is a problem. The question about whether the short-term rental market crowds out year-round rentals, I would imagine there's some of that. However, I think a lot of the properties that are in the short-term rental market would not be the housing that would really address a lot of the housing needs that we're talking about today. We've got a lot of high-end properties that are probably never going to be considered, affordable housing unless they were all subdivided or something. So I don't, if that conversation is important to the full council, I guess our town council leadership or the council needs to move forward with some of that. Might come out of our other subcommittee, the zoning one. But I think that we do need to look at some of our zoning to see if it's appropriate. And I have a hard stop at 6, so that's my last comment.
We need to schedule a next meeting, but you got one more thing to say reasonably quickly?
Responding to Councilor Schnepp here, the public has not been a partner in the regional housing strategy plan, the housing production plan, and partly in the LCP. Okay, and those were basically copied from Cape Cod Commission to the housing production plan to where we are now in the LCP. It is not a popular idea to change zoning in our village centers. It's one of the reasons people come here, is for what the villages look like, not what somebody thinks is best for the villages. And I see this as a complete non-starter, and I think we should not waste our time on it. Because that'll be you open a can of worms on here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you like that. But now, I'm not for the duplexes. I can understand the concern that people have for that. But for changing some of the zoning laws and regulations, I believe that definitely should be on the table. Now, maybe I misunderstood what, as far as the duplex, okay, fine, that makes sense what you're saying as far as how they'll end up being short-term. I'm not trying to do anything that's going to harm. But as far as looking at some of the zoning in the town of Barnstable, oh no, that needs to be put on the table because half of it was put in place too long ago, and we all know why it was put in place, and it can't stay in place. So we have to deal with that. So it should go on the table.
I understand what you feel was the main reason for zoning was put in place. But zoning was put in place so you don't have a gas station next to a church, next to a house, next to a skyscraper. I lived in Houston, Texas. I know what that's like, okay? And that's where you need zoning is the fair. Here we're going to have retail. Here we're going to have construction areas. Here we're going to have housing. And that there are reasons for zoning other than the one fact and redlining in the past. But the redlining is illegal now, and it has been illegal.
And
if anybody wants to come into my village or Centerville and that, you come in and buy a house, it doesn't matter what you look like.
I can respect 100% what you're saying, but let's be real. Number one, I understand exactly what zoning is about. And I know it's not just for the redlining and it's illegal and all of that, but killing Robert Brooks was illegal too. They still do it. What my point is, when I lived here as a child, there were homes up and down, and they didn't have no problem taking that residential area and turning into a business area. They did it for their purpose. There was no one I knew at the time living around who had the money or the energy to fight them, all right? But it was done. And a lot of people had to move off. So I understand all about zoning. I know what zoning is. I know why it's important to not have a gas station next to a school, okay? But at the same time, I don't think we have to spend our time talking the obvious. But, so I won't get into explaining to you how I know about zoning, okay? We're just gonna say it needs to be changed, in my opinion. So that I will fight to the day I die.
That's it, Cynthia, we gotta schedule another meeting.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? Rick, you'd kind of tasked me with short-term rental, but I think John Crow has been working that, so I'd like to just keep it with him. I know he's done a lot of work on that.
Okay.
Just so you know, you actually have another date already scheduled for the 29th. It's already been booked with IT at 4 p.m. with a Zoom link. You did that at your last meeting.
Okay.
If that's still good with members, we can keep it. If not, I'll cancel it and try to find another date.
29th
The 29th,
of January at 4 o'clock.
4 p.m.? Is that okay with everybody? Okay. You just need a motion to adjourn before you lose your members.
Yeah. A second? All those in favor say aye?
Aye.
You are adjourned at 6:05.